today, and I salute everybody that was just saluted. And I just really want to salute Yejide Oronila tonight for coming all the way from Washington, D.C. I just want to say that Yejide is a leading member of the African People's Socialist Party, and at the same time, the president or the leadership of the African National Women's Organization, organizing African women around the world and inside the borders of the United States, as well as part of the overall struggle of African people for complete and total liberation. So, I mean, just a really powerful speaker, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation, and thank you very much for coming tonight. And, you know, I want to begin by, of course, saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who organized and led the African People's Socialist Party, founded in 1972, but who has been on the forefront of the struggle for African liberation since about 1966, when he tore down a hideous, racist, anti-African mural that portrayed African people in hideous caricature that hung in visibility on the stairwell in the City Hall of St. Petersburg, Florida, where the headquarters of the African People's Socialist Party is today. And for that, he was charged. I think he was tried twice on federal charges for, you know, vandalizing. I don't even know what it all was, you know, but he was sentenced to 5 years in prison on federal charges. He served about 2.5 years of that. And, you know, when we look at all around the country, African people are struggling to take down these statues of you know, the Civil War and the Confederacy and all over. Well, you know, this already happened in St. Petersburg. The chairman did a favor to that city, and, you know, they have never apologized for what they did of prosecuting that. But that wall is still empty. They could never replace it with anything else, because that is a memorial to the struggle of African people to be free. And I want to make it clear that our days of reparations to African people are under the leadership of the African Revolution, and that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party is absolutely determined to liberate Africa and all its resources, to unite all African people as one people wherever they have been forcibly dispersed around the world, and to have the return of their stolen resources, the value of their stolen labor, and to have their stolen land returned. Africa is their homeland. And this is happening. The chairman and the African People's Socialist Party is absolutely determined. African people will be free. There is no more fighting some symptom of the system, fighting some policy, fighting another murder of an African person by the police, or fighting the fact that 2.3 million people are in these concentration camps called prisons here in the United States, and at least half of them are African, and most of the rest of them are indigenous and Mexican. You know, that this is a colonial policy against the colonized peoples inside the borders of the United States and around the world. The chairman has been there fighting COINTELPRO, fighting the US government attack that assassinated and murdered incredible leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, and so many others of the 1960s, flooded the African community with crack cocaine and heroin, criminalized African people, and began the process of building prisons in rural white areas all over this country as part of economic development for white people, while locking up African people, creating prison cells for African babies as they are being born, knowing how many Africans are going to go into prison. In the state of Florida, where I live, there's a huge percentage of the other prisons are private prisons, and they have a deal, they have a contract with the state of Florida that every bed has to be filled, and they are filled with Africans. So this system has to end. This has been going on for 600 years, and we're going to talk about this more, and what it is that our relationship is. I want to salute the African People's Socialist Party for its 7th Congress. that was just held in St. Louis, and a lot of it at the beautiful, beautiful Uhuru House, the Aquaba Hall that we saw, what it looked like in the beginning and how absolutely beautiful it is today. People came from around the country, around the world, to participate in this Congress in which the chairman puts out the political report, the direction of the movement for the next 5 years. It's voted on. There's just so much to say about it. If you have the opportunity, you can go to the Burning Spear YouTube channel. You can watch segments and days of the Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. It's historic, it's beautiful. And you know, I also want to say that just to be here in Philadelphia is very emotional and very powerful, because this furniture store is here. It's beautiful. I want to salute Comrade Allison Haney, also leading member of the African People's Socialist Party here, Janice Bryant, who work in this furniture store, to say that, you know, the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement are all over the world and all over the United States, not just here in Philadelphia, not just in Washington, D.C., where they were yesterday for Black is Back, but in St. Petersburg, Florida, in Oakland, California, in Boston, in St. Louis, in Chicago, and so many other places, Alabama, throughout Florida, throughout the South, Atlanta, growing all over the world, as well as in London, in Paris, in Sweden, and in occupied Azania, which is South Africa. The African People's Socialist Party is building near Johannesburg, in Gauteng province, which is the province, the richest province in South Africa, where the gold and the diamonds were, where Africans were worked to death in those mines, and in a lot of ways still are, and where African people, even with the ANC, the African National Congress, and the so-called liberation led by Nelson Mandela, are more oppressed, more colonized today than ever before, and that white people still own about 80% of the land of South Africa. That land belongs to African people, and the African People's Socialist Party is determined that that's going to be returned. So even as we are here tonight, on the ground near Johannesburg, and I want to say that these comrades of the party live in what's called the townships, which is where African people are forced on their own land to live in corrugated tin shacks in a room that there would probably be a whole neighborhood of little tiny shacks inside this little space right here. And you know, that revolution is not over. That revolution is going to be won. So we, you know, this is really significant. I wanted to say about Philadelphia that in 1985, when this city and the U.S. government, but this city dropped a bomb on the MOVE organization right here on Osage Avenue and burned down an entire neighborhood of African people. Wasn't it about 60 houses, and killed 11 African children, men, and women. On TV, you know, flew a helicopter over and dropped a firebomb on that house. In response to that, the African People's Socialist Party sent forces here to Philadelphia to organize and use the slogan, "Reinforcements are on the way," and organized here in Philadelphia. And 20 years before the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, near St. Louis, and the brilliant resistance of African people, the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement was here, where month after month after month after month, another African person was murdered by the police in this city over and over and over again. Only the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement in Petum was out there fighting, and fighting for the right of African people to Black community control the police and end to this war against the African community. So this has a history that's deep inside this city and inside the Northeast, and I salute Comrade Ali and Ruby and the forces that have been here from the Solidarity Committee as well, winning white people to this stance. So, it has been said, this is the 5th night of our tour of the Days of Reparations to African people, and we've been in St. Louis and Huntsville, Alabama, which is very powerful. In the heart of, while we were there, by the way, we went to the lynching museum, the first ever in Montgomery, Alabama. Jesse and I stopped there, and it's something that shows the history. There's 2 parts of it. I do urge you, if you ever had a chance to go, because it could be better. If African People's Socialist Party did it, it would be really powerful, and it would show resistance, and it doesn't show that. But it has this memorial that just to be in it, because it's outside in this large acre or so of land with a overhang, but you're outside, and hanging from this roof are, the symbols that it doesn't look like bodies, but it looks like a coffin almost, for each county of the South, or the southern states, listing the names of all of the Africans who were lynched, who were terrorized by white people who were our ancestors, who never paid any price whatsoever for that. And to, all the counties, I'm not sure, it was like hundreds of these, and you're just walking and you're looking up at it, and you just, it evokes it. It really evokes it in a powerful way to just see. You just keep walking and walking, and there's more and more and more, and it tells you, Jefferson County, Kentucky, where I grew up, near where I grew up, and Pinellas County, Florida, where we live, of all the names, of Africans that were murdered there. And then when you go outside of this, and you walk outside, then they have all of another representation of each county and of all the names of the people. And some counties, by the way, in Mississippi and Alabama, there are 2 columns of names. There are probably 20 names, 30 names for that county. Then outside, all of the coffins are laid out to represent, it's very emotional. It's very emotional, and it really brings us to, what we're talking about tonight, our relationship as white people. And this is, what we're responsible for. And it's what we want to talk about, because, when we look around and we see the world today, we see this incredible crisis of imperialism, which Chairman Omali Yeshitela tells us is in a crisis because of the resistance of African and oppressed people around the world. It's in a crisis because people were fighting back and saying, God damn, like we heard, we don't have to follow your leadership. You're not stealing our oil anymore. You're not stealing our resources. You're going to pay a price for this. And the U.S. is finding itself in this situation that is dangerous but good for oppressed people on planet Earth, because it leaves an opening, and it forces African people and oppressed and colonized peoples into revolution, because there's no other choice. It's a matter of survival. It's a matter of will people live and survive the conditions that we see tonight. And, the African People's Solidarity Committee, has been said, is the organization of white people under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And it's really a brilliant strategy, because the African People's Solidarity Committee is the party's organization of white people strategically placed inside the white population as a means of extending the African Revolution into the heart of white power. And so we have a job, and that is to be the voices of black power in white faith, to raise what is not the responsibility of African people to raise, but to raise because of our own unity with the right of African people to be free, and our own sickness with our relationship to African people and the people on the planet Earth, and our willingness to say we've got to reconcile this. We've got to to overcome this. We have to rectify this relationship that we have. We don't want to be the enemies of African people and oppressed people on this planet, separated in self-imposed isolation. as Chairman Omali Yeshitela says and describes it, we want to be part of the world. You know, we have this deaths of despair. And I'm sure that all of us in the white community have had somebody, you know, that have deaths of despair, which is either suicide, drug overdose, or alcoholism, death from alcoholism. I could say in my own family, I have at least 5 deaths from alcoholism. And my brother died when he was 25 years old from overdose of drugs, and, you know, in a serious way. And this is just so common for the white society. Why? We're supposed to be the greatest civilization on the planet Earth. Why are we in despair? Well, we're in despair because we see there's no future for this system. And I believe that we are in despair because we want to be part of humanity. We want to find our own humanity. We want to be part of the world. And then we go out there as colonizers and try to adopt or, you know, usurp the cultures of other oppressed people. That is another colonizer's way to do it. But this way, we have the ability to genuinely to pay reparations. You know, I think as Micah was laying out. For the party, this is an incredible strategy because it encircles the struggle for Black power, the struggle of the African working class, with a rear base of white people ready to take the stand, to stand in solidarity with the right of African people to be liberated and to fight against the U.S. government's attacks on the African working class and to return the stolen resources. So, you know, this is not the white left. I just want to be really clear. This is absolutely nothing to do with that. When I first heard the chairman speak in Louisville, Kentucky in 1976, and that's where the chairman announced that the party was calling the African People Solidarity Committee this founding conference. It was going to be a few months later. So some other people and myself drove down to St. Petersburg, Florida, when I first saw it. I'd just come back from living in Europe. I was living in France, and the chairman asked me, well, what do you think of the French Communist Party? Which I was like, oh, I think it's great. And, you know, he was like yelling to everybody, oh my gosh. You know, and of course now I understand that. I mean, of course the white left is about maintaining, is about greater sectors of the white society gaining more power on the pedestal of the oppression of African people. This is not about that. And one of the first things that Chairman Omali Yeshitela taught us, that is something that we have to still win and fight for today, and do, is that this struggle is not about racism, and that the African People's Socialist Party is struggling for power. And they don't give a damn about racist ideas in our heads. What they're struggling for is power and the state in their own hands to be able to make sure to have the power and the military ability to defend the African working class and to make sure that no white person or anybody with racist ideas in their heads can ever hurt an African ever again. That they will have their own state power, their own state, because it's never worked inside the borders of the United States, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so what the chairman said is that there is colonialism inside this country. And if we really look at that, I mean, to me it's like, oh, that explains it. That explains it, because otherwise, how can we explain that white people have everything and African people, no matter what, are catching hell? Even through the class level within the African population. Even Africans who would be middle class lost their houses by the millions to the subprime mortgage. They were targeted for that. That's a whole story. We have a whole event just on that. What Wells Fargo and everybody did, specifically targeting the African community with these subprime mortgages, and Africans lost the greatest wealth ever as collectively during that time. And you know, and that since the recession of 2008 and even 2001, the African population has never recovered but white people are richer. White people are richer, so this gap that we're talking about is growing and growing and growing. And I think it's really critical. I just wanted to say that I was reading a statistic that I saw an article in The Guardian of the UK, and it was a study that was done in the US, and it said by 2020, which is basically next year, that white families, we always say, by the way, our statistic is white families have 22 times the wealth of African families. And when we say that, it doesn't mean income, it means house, savings account, car, assets, property. And this says that on the current trajectory, which is why there has to be African revolution and black and political and economic power in the hands of African people and reparations, that African people by 2020, that white families by 2020 will have 86 times the wealth of African people. And that African people are getting poorer and poorer and poorer, more impoverished, while white people are getting the jobs that are out there that Trump is always saying we have a fabulous economy. Well, not for the African community. And so, and the trajectory over the years following that, if this system continues intact, is that African people would have zero, as a population, would have zero assets. So that's colonialism. That's not racism. That's a political and economic condition imposed by an entire nation that's the colonizer, and that's us. That's us. And so the thing that the chairman tells us is that this system is built on what's called parasitic capitalism. That capitalism was born through an impoverished Europe, leaving the shores of Europe, going to assault Africa, to turn African human beings into commodities, the first items for sale on a stock market. This is how the stock market of Amsterdam and London and even New York were formed, based on the sale, the kidnapping and sale and human trafficking of African people, turning African people into machines to be worked to death. This is how this economy was born. This is how Europe got to be wealthy and powerful and controlling the entire world. This and the genocide against the indigenous people, this theft of the land that still belongs to the indigenous people, and the colonization of the entire world. And colonization is such a cold term, but I can tell you that I've tried to study as many places and what Europe did to the people of Vietnam, to the people of India, where they had 200 years of colonialism, to the people of the Philippines, to colonialism through every, its fingers spread out throughout this entire continent. Every story is a story of death, destruction, and degradation everywhere. So that this is what provides the ability for us to have opportunity, to have democratic rights, to have social wealth to pass down from generation to generation, so that when white people get married, something like 70% of white families have wealth for the newly married couple to be able to have a down payment on a house. This is common. This is common. That's why we always say, by the way, in our appeals, can somebody give $1,000? Because many times people have said, yes, I can give $1,000 because we have that in our bank accounts. I just want to say that. It's like, well, of course you have $1,000 in your bank account. I mean, this is what it means to be white. And we always say we even had a white homeless man who got his inheritance, who came to many, many events. He could never put in any money, and he said, when I get my inheritance, and he sent $1,000 when he got his inheritance. I mean, that's the reality. That's what we face, is social wealth. And so all white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. It's really critical to understand. Even white working people, even impoverished white people, LGBT, women, workers, disabled, we all sit on this pedestal. So it means, well, no, we didn't all get the wealth of the Rockefellers, and there is this, ruling class that's got all this money. but we have expected to be able to gain wealth, to be able to climb up this ladder of success, and all we had to do was be the slave catchers, the slave drivers, the selling African people, picking up the gun against indigenous people, killing them, stealing their land. That was the pact that we made with this devil called U.S. imperialism, and where our humanity lies, and it's why we have nothing more than drugs, alcohol, and suicide if we see our future within that system. Because the people on the planet Earth are going to bring it down, and they want it down. They want the system off their backs. And that we want to say that this organization of the African People's Socialist Party and its important organization, the African People's Solidarity Committee, is not about taking on a symptom or a policy of imperialism. It is about building a disciplined, organized movement of African people and all its allies, which includes Union de Barrio from the Mexican community and the Palestinians and everyone, to liberate Africa. And the party is clear that it's going to bring all oppressed and colonized peoples with it, and any allies in terms of solidarity, of North Americans that can go with it. We have the ability to do that. This is the future. This is our future. We can be part of the future. You know what they're saying about climate change? That this planet, through capitalism, through parasitic capitalism, the same system that wiped out hundreds of millions of African and indigenous people, is wiping out the ability for this planet to be able to be a habitat for human beings to live. We have whole events on that, and it's really important that we understand it, because white people are not going to solve it. It has to, this system that created that problem has to go, and that only a system that wiped out hundreds of millions of human beings will wipe out the earth. It can't be cured by something that imperialism does to try to bring back the carbon emissions back to the earth. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to happen when indigenous people have this land, when African people have their land, and when oppressed and colonized people can live and develop a science that's for the people and for the earth and represents the ability of all human beings and humankind and every form of living being to be able to live on this planet, no one at the expense of anyone else. That's the future that I want to be part of. I salute that. It's a beautiful future. When you see that Black Power blueprint, and we need to have it like a caravan that goes out to St. Louis and see that flag, that 50-foot flagpole with the 25-foot red, black, and green African flag, and all the school children and parents that bring the kids to see it. You know how much that's loved in the African community of the north side of St. Louis, where it's devastated. It's so bombed out there. It looks almost like a picture of Syria or something, Yemen. Today, I mean, the conditions are obviously colonialism, and the African revolution is there, and it's just so dynamic. And this is the future that I want to be part of. I want to be part of an earth with no oppression, where African people are free, where indigenous people are free and liberated, and all of the wealth of this system goes back to the people from whom it was stolen. That is the only future on this planet. So I want to say unity through.